In this video, we're going to make ourselves a level by creating a bunch of blocks using prefabs, and then we can play our game. Super duper exciting. Let's jump in and talk about prefabs. Okay, we have one block in our game. How do we get more than one block in there so we can be smashing a whole bunch of blocks? Well, we could just get there and duplicate. This is the first stage of adding more things to your game, is just straight up duplicating. So Control D, and you can see over here a whole bunch of blocks, and they're on top of each other at the moment. 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Okay, so you can do it that way, and these are exactly the same right at this point in time. So they've all got a sprite renderer and a box collider and the script that we've created with the block script on it as a component here. So that's one way to do it, but if I got there and said, you know what, I want all of my objects in this scene and all of my blocks in all of my scenes, so we're in level 1, so in level 2 and 3 and 4, I want them all to be rotated. For example, rotated by, I don't know, 45 degrees or so, blink like that, and there's one underneath it as well. So I want them all to be like that. Damn, now I have to go and copy or duplicate them all again, or select all of them, find all of them, not just in this scene, but in other scenes, and rotate them, and hopefully I rotate them the same way. So it's a little bit of a pain. It's okay if you only need to duplicate 1 or 2 things and you're not changing it much, but there is a far better way for us to do this. Let me undo all of this stuff that I just did just now. Okay, so back to my one block. And the far better way to do it is to create a prefab. And a prefab is basically a template for other objects to use. The way we do that is we create one game object. We have this at the moment. We have block. I'm just going to close play space. We have block that we've created already, and I need to create myself a new folder in my assets directory that I will call prefabs. Create folder. Prefabs, excellent. I don't have to create a folder, but this is going to let me keep it all nice and tidy. And then the way that we create our prefab or our template is to grab the game object and drag it down into our assets directory. And you can see down here we've got block, and is created assets in our assets folder, prefabs, block.prefab. If I right click on that object, this asset in our asset area, and go to Show in Explorer, or the Mac equivalent, you can see that we've now created a block.prefab is a file that exists, and it sits right within our assets directory in the prefabs folder. It's block.prefab. That is now a thing. It's 4 kilobytes. Okay, so we have an actual asset. And what do we do now? Well, it's as simple as dragging the block either into the hierarchy and letting go. That's created a new prefab instance. So this is the terminology here. This is the prefab. These are game objects, and each time I instantiate, in other words, to create an instance from the prefab, I have created a new instance of that prefab. I can also drag the prefab directly into the scene and place it where I want to be placed. So that's another way that I can create an instance. And you can see that my hierarchy is starting to fill up a little bit randomly of where it's placed. So what I'd like to do is to right-click, create empty, call this blocks, reset the transform by going right-click, reset, and then just place the blocks within this blocks empty game object. So it's nice and neat and tidy. You can see we've got block 1 and block 1 and block 2. Okay, so that's how you create a prefab, and that is how we instantiate prefabs. Later on, we'll be instantiating prefabs with our code, but for now, we're just instantiating them by dragging them into our scene and then placing them where we want them. You can tell that something is a prefab within your hierarchy because it is blue. You see how it's slightly different color? All these other things in here aren't prefabbed. They're not prefabs or instances of prefabs. They're just regular game objects. These are still game objects, but they're part of a prefab. So when I click on block, this is our first block that we created here, you'll see that I have some information on it up at the top here: prefab, select, revert, and apply. Okay, they'll come in handy in a moment. If I click select, then it tells me this is the prefab that you have been instantiated from. If I click this other block, click select, then it's back to the same prefab, exactly the same prefab in here. Now, what are some of the cool things that we can do with prefabs? Well, the first thing we can do is to very quickly make changes across all of our instances. So I'll put my blocks up here, pretend we've got our game. Just putting them in a little bit loose at the moment. We'll organize them a little bit better soon. I probably want a couple more than that, so drag another block in and drag one more block in. And you can see each of these prefabs have the same information on them. We've got our script, which is important. That will make sure they destroy. And each of them is referencing that block.cs script. Okay, cool. So if I click on the prefab, this is the prefab that's down in the assets, in our assets folder down here. If I click on that and make a change, then any of the instances that are linked to that prefab will change. If I click on the color and change the color up to yellow or say green, see how they all change to green? That's really cool, super handy. And you'll notice sometimes our prefab thumbnail doesn't update. Give it a moment, or if you right click on it, you can say, where are we? Refresh, re-import is what I'm looking for. Click on re-import, and that usually pokes it into existence and says, oh, okay, I'm actually green, aren't I? Okay, so we can change directly on the prefab, and anything we change on the prefab will change the instances that we have in our scene. And I've gone and dropped a couple in here. I'm just going to organize them again. Doesn't really matter what they're named at this point. We can have lots of blocks, lots of things just called block or block one. Doesn't matter at the moment. We could tidy that up, but that's fine for now. What we can also do is change an instance of this prefab. So if we click on one of these blocks here, I will change the color to, we'll say, pink. Okay, and I've changed just that instance. Now, what is also cool is if I say, you know what, I want them all to be pink. That actually looks pretty good. I can click the button up here that is apply, and when I do that, the prefab will change, and any of the instances that are linked to that prefab will change as well. So click apply, and you can see everything went to pink. And again, this is going to take a moment. Oh, if I click on it, that got it to change the thumbnail. Okay, so they're all pink here. You might say, well, what if I want them to be different? Okay, here's where we look and find something very cool. The prefab is currently pink. All of the instances are currently pink. Not a problem. If I click on the end block and change the color to, say, yellow. Okay, great. This is now yellow. If I was to click apply, they would all be changed to yellow. If I find another block and change that block to, we'll say, green. Excellent. Now we have a number of different colors. If I was to click, well, I'm on green here. If I was to click on apply, it will change all of the instances that are the same as the prefab that haven't been changed for the quality that I've just changed, for the attribute I've just changed. Okay, so let me say that again slowly, and I'll give you an example here. You can see when you click on any of your fields here, it changes color to blue, and in particular, I want you to have a look at anything that's been changed is bold. That's not because I've clicked on it. When it's bold, it says, I am different to the prefab. So the color here is different to the prefab. If we click on one of these purple pink ones, then you'll see that color is not bold because it is the same as the prefab. That's really good to know because then we know what will and won't change. If I change the prefab at this point, then anything that I change where an instance is not bold, in other words, it has not been changed from the prefab, it will also change. But anything as an instance that has been changed away from the prefab, and you can tell it's been changed because it's bold, that won't change. So let's click on the purple block and change its color to, we'll say, what do we need? Blue. And you can see it's only changing those things that had those instances that haven't already deviated from the prefab in terms of color. Okay, and this looks like it's going to take a second to update again. I just want to keep it, normally I wouldn't bother with this, but I want you to see that it's the same thing. Okay, also, if I was to click on the yellow one and say, okay, I want to apply yellow, it's different from the prefab, but I want the prefab now to be yellow, then same deal. Anything that is exactly the same as the prefab at the moment will change when I say apply, but anything that's been manually changed away from the prefab won't. So I click apply and blunk, they all turn to yellow, including our prefab. Okay, so that's the fundamentals of it, and I want you to really train your eye to look for the bold when you're looking through your components and your fields on your game objects. And if you are looking at that, one thing you'll see as well is position and rotation are always going to be bold on your instances, because what Unity says is if you change something on position, that is always going to be local to this instance. We don't want to then go and change all of the other instances as well. So if I click on this yellow one here and change the position a little bit and then click apply, boink, then it doesn't go and change the position of these other game objects in here, because they are also bold. They have been changed from the prefab. And now if I was to change a different attribute, so say I was to change the scale just by dragging up the Y scale here, make that nice and big, you can see that these are all yellow, this one is green. The changing of scale will only impact the scale of these things and won't impact the color. So if I click apply, they all get stretched out, including the prefab, no matter what the color is. The color is changed independently of the scale. Okay, so there we go. That's the fundamentals of prefabs. And the cool thing is this is going to allow us to build quickly a whole bunch of tiles so that we can make our own little level. Before I make the level, I want to show you one tool here. If you go to Edit, Snap Settings, and you can see Move X, Move Y, and Move Z. We're interested in Move X and Y at the moment. I currently have my settings at 0.5, which means they will snap when I hold down Control and move an object. It snaps every half on the X or on the Y when I move it. I'm just going to zero this back to 2 and 6, so you can see it's nice and clean there. If I hold down Control and move it down 5.5, 5, 4.5, 4, and so on. It's the same if we do it on the X-axis. Now, I'm tempted to leave it at 0.5 because I might wish to have some smaller blocks as well, but for now I'll change these to 1 on the X and the Y. Don't need to worry about any of the others at the moment. And then I can, when I move it around, it'll change it a whole block. I can either drag a new prefab in, or I can duplicate, Control D, you see this block here, it duplicates it. It's fine, it will duplicate now as a prefab. So as an instance. So duplicating an instance will create another instance. That instance is still linked to a block down here that I need to just update. Yep. So it's okay to duplicate these instances of the prefabs, and then you can see if I hold down Control, it'll move it next to it. If I was to hold down Shift and click on 2 blocks, hit duplicate, and then Control, move to the right, I now have 4 blocks. If I was to highlight either in the scene here or on my hierarchy, highlight all of these blocks and hit duplicate. And where are we? We're over here. I must have grabbed one that I didn't want to grab. Let me just grab 1, 2, 3 from. Hold down Control while I select, or you can do Shift and then hit Control D or Command D and then Control as I move. Then you can see I've got a bunch. So that's a way that you can create a whole bunch of them, have them line up nice and snap into a particular position. You don't have to have them snap, but I think it's kind of cool to do so. I'm going to highlight these, move them up and out of the way a little bit. Okay. And then once I've done that, I know that I can go in and say select that one, and that one, change those particular ones to, I don't know, pink, and now I've got a little bit of a pattern that I've made in my scene. I can make something a little bit more interesting and a little bit prettier in my scene. It hasn't messed up the prefab at all. I could go and change other aspects of the prefab and know that my color will stay as the color is as I've gone and created it. One last thing that I'll show you is I could take this object and snap it by finding one of the vertices. So one of the outside points, so the corners, we'll say, hold down V on the keyboard, and then you can see as I move around the outside of my block, it's snapping to the outside points, and then left mouse button, and as I move it, it'll snap to a corner or snap to a vertex of one of these other objects. That's another way to get things lined up, so I can do that, snap it just there. Click on green, hold down V, click left mouse button, and then move it over so it snaps up against this other object that we've got here. Okay, so that's a couple of ways to move things around. That's how we create our prefabs. Remember to put your prefabs within a game object, an empty game object, so you can keep it nice and grouped. So you can go blink and hide all of that, not have it fill up your entire hierarchy. And here is the challenge. I want you to make a scene. Haha, make a scene. Get it? Yes, I know. So use prefab block to make a game level. We've already created the prefab block, and you can make one yourself if you haven't already. Use color to make the level interesting. And here are some ideas for you. You can write your name using the blocks. You can draw a face of a character. You can create a maze. You can rotate your blocks 45 degrees to have them look like little diamonds. You can have different size blocks. And once you have created something interesting, please share a screenshot to our community forum so we can have a look at it. When you come back from doing that, I will show you just a quick little creation that I'll put together. I'll speed up the video so you can just see it quickly, and then I will wrap up the video. Okay, so jump in, create your level. It should be playable. It should have all the blocks being destroyed, which is great. Create that, share it with the community, and I'll see you back here after you're done. Okay, welcome back. You can see I've gone and been self-indulgent and made my name Rick in my scene, although the K is a bit wacky, but well, it'll be okay for now. Let's see if this actually plays, and we can bash the Rick to pieces. Boink, oh, disappears, good. I've turned off my lose collider, so I need to turn that back on. It was in play space, lose collider, glonk. And then the ball might be going a little bit fast. These might be a little bit close. There's lots of tuning we need to do in terms of making sure that the game's actually playable. But for now, oh my goodness. Here we go. Oh, there we go. Oh, okay, so it's playable. It needs a little bit easier to play. Oh, okay, now I'm getting a bit of a run on. There we go. But there we go. That's the foundation of our game. All good to go. You can see the ball slowing down. Some stuff we need to do in terms of why is it slowing down. Let's stop it slowing down. Whenever I hit the corner of my paddle, it makes it slow down a bunch. So still plenty of work to do in this game, but you can see that we've created ourselves a level, which is pretty much core to making these games. Very excellent. So great work in this video. I really look forward to seeing what you've come up with, and I will see you in the next video.